Hello and welcome to the interview on France 24. On Thursday, Belgrade announced that the arrest of Ratko Mladic, the former commander of the Bosnian Serb army, is one of the men responsible for the worst atrocities in Europe since the Second World War. His troops besieged the city of Sarajevo for over 3 years, subjecting its civilians to indiscriminate shelling. And in July 1995 came the massacre of Srebrenica, 8,000 men and boys slaughtered in the most brutal way. Now, the news has been hailed as a historic day for international justice. It also boosts Serbia's chances to join the European Union. To talk about all this, I'm glad to be joined in our Paris studio by Božidar Đelić, Serbian Deputy Prime Minister in charge of EU integration. Mr. Đelić, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Before we talk about the implication of the arrest, I'd like to ask you, can you tell us more about the exact circumstances which led to the tip-off which ultimately led to the arrest of Mr. Mladic?
I don't know, because this is the job of a secret police, and as you can imagine, what we're going to do now is to check thoroughly how General Mladic was able to escape justice for so long. And therefore, a lot of the operative details will not be revealed for some time until everything is checked and used by our secret police to come to, if this is the case, for responsibility of people, including people in the state apparatus, if there are such. We also, the Democrats in Serbia, who basically took charge of this search 3 years ago after the win of President Tadic at the presidential elections, what exactly happened in the last 3 years and also before. It wasn't the time to do that before we found Mladic. Now is the time to analyze why and how he was able to escape justice so long.
It took, as you said, more than 15 years to apprehend Mr. Mladic. Do you get the feeling that there were maybe elements within the security services who were protecting him?
It is for this type of analysis to say if this is the case or not. What I can only say is that nobody will be protected. There was lots of doubts on the true will of the Serbian leadership to find Mladic. And I think that this is the absolute best proof that this will, for the last 3 years since President Tadic took over and was able to appoint people in the secret police that were sharing the European values of us, that there was not a single day where we didn't try to do the job. Let's not forget, there was one more fugitive on the run, Mr. Hadžić, and we also have to continue working with the Hague Tribunal on operating issues, exchanging information, protecting witnesses, and so forth. So this we see above all as a contribution of the Republic of Serbia to lasting regional reconciliation. This is something that we owed to the innocent victims, to their families. And this is now also Serbia's claim to have justice made also for Serbian victims. For those who are accused of crimes against the Serbs, Ramush Haradinaj, the former Prime Minister of Kosovo, who is currently in The Hague, and also asking the United Nations Security Council to establish an ad hoc mechanism that will investigate the very serious allegations on human organ trafficking of Serbs killed by Kosovar troops in 1999 and later. I mean, one should have the same approach. Not stereotyping of people. If there's guilt, it should be individual, but of course, it should be the same standards for all involved.
Now, according to media reports, Mr. Mladic is in poor health. Are you worried that the state of his health could jeopardize his extradition to the Netherlands?
Well, you can be half pregnant, you can be a half democracy. In Serbia, we do have separation of powers and our judiciary is independent. Right now, what is being done is that the lawyers for Mr. Mladic are lodging some appeals and those should be exhausted in the days to come. The earliest time when he can be extradited is Monday, but that might last a few days more. I do not expect anything that will prevent him being extradited to the Hague Tribunal. And later on, it will be up to that court.
Now, you're in charge of EU integration. Of course, this is excellent news for you in your mission to join the European Union. We know that some member states, including the Netherlands, had made it a prerequisite for you to join. Does that mean that you expect to be granted official candidate status by the end of the year, as you were hoping for?
Well, for sure, this is a big step forward, but I think things have changed, but not everything has changed. We still have to do a lot of reforms. we have to adopt, and that law is currently in our parliament, the new law on political party financing. We need to continue fighting against organized crime and corruption, where Serbia has been increasingly recognized as a leader in the region. And now our services will devote more resources to that end, now that the search for Mladic is finished. And we also need to do a lot more on our other aspects, in particular the judiciary system improvement and so forth. So that there's a lot of work ahead of us, but definitely those are things that are under our control. And therefore, the goal of Serbia, which is to reach by December of 2011 a candidate status and also have a date set to begin the formal negotiations to join the European Union, this is more than ever our goal.
Another stumbling block, of course, is the unresolved status of Kosovo. Your country has vowed to not recognise the sovereignty of Kosovo. We know that 22 EU member states have already done so. What kind of settlement do you think would be acceptable for both Serbia and Brussels?
The more important thing to note is that Serbia tabled a resolution in the United Nations last September with all 27 members of the EU. As you mentioned, 22 recognized Kosovo, but 5 did not. So there is no consensus within the European Union on this issue. And by the way, there's absolutely no consensus in the world on this, because countries such as India, South Africa, Russia, Indonesia, Vietnam, Brazil, Argentina, a very long list of countries are not recognizing Kosovo because they see it as a dangerous precedent for democratic states being broken up against their own will, and therefore something which is trampling upon basic tenets of international law. What we want is not a frozen conflict. What we want is a solution. So Serbia wants to be part of a solution of a very complicated issue such as Kosovo.
When you talk about a solution, there are now direct talks between Serbia and Kosovo, albeit on very technical levels. Does it mean that there will be a de facto, a tacit recognition that there is a state next to Serbia, or is it for you still unpalatable?
Serbia will never recognize directly or indirectly the unilaterally declared independence of Kosovo of 2008. What we want, however, is to be a constructive player, to be part of the solution, and therefore come to a historical compromise between Serbs and Albanians. Because this is the only thing that will stick. This is the only solution that will provide lasting peace in the Balkans. Playing one nationalism against another one is certainly not the European way forward.
Talking about the capture of Mr. Mladic, now that Milosevic was tried, we know he died in prison, but the trial started, Karadzic is in The Hague. Do you think that a chapter has been turned?
I do. And also, I think with the resolution on Srebrenica adopted last March by our parliament, which recognizes this terrible crime, and which also guarantees the territorial integrity of Bosnia and Herzegovina, I think now, if guilt there is, it should be individual, not to fall on the shoulders of all people from one ethnic group or one country. And therefore, now is the time to look forward to a common European future, and lasting reconciliation means being sensitive to somebody else's suffering, but also being sure that the suffering in your own people will be recognized, judged in the same way, on the same standards as is the case for the other groups in the Balkans. And I think the European Union should seize this opportunity. This is the first time that Europe is united, that it speaks with one voice to the Balkans. And it's the first time in history that the Balkan countries are run by people who look in one direction and share basically the same values. And I think this is this Europeanization of the Balkans that is close at hand. And I do hope that this decade, not this century, but this decade, will see us all with a lot of hard work, with no privileges, no shortcuts, but all of us being able to join the European Union by the end of this decade. That's the goal of Serbia for sure.
We see the rise of nationalism within the European Union. Countries tend to close themselves behind their borders. Do you think that the Balkan countries are still welcome into the European family?
Well, for sure, when you have such an economic crisis and the institutional issues, because it took so much time to have this Lisbon agreement hammered out and then implemented, those are not the best of times, and we're very much aware of that. On the other hand, what is quite important is to recognize that if Europe wants to be strong, it has to be appealing, above all, to its own neighborhood. And therefore, this soft power of Europe, which still exists, has to be maintained, because if one does not have a true perspective of joining and sufficient resources with domestic ones, to build the infrastructure, to deal with sensitive minorities, to deal with education and science, then I'm afraid that the European agenda might be replaced by another one, much less palatable one. And I think, given that the Western Balkans wants Croatia, as we hope joins in 2013, it's not a big place. It's less than 20 million people, less than 100 billion euro of GDP. I think it's something manageable for the European Union.
You said earlier that maybe a chapter had been turned, and yet we saw some demonstrations in support of Mr. Mladic in the Serbian capital, Belgrade. How polarizing has his arrest been in Serbia?
Well, let's put things in perspective. At the maximum, there was 200 to 300 people for a country which has 7.5 million inhabitants, and I think that for sure Serbia is turning this corner. Serbia has a feeling of relief that finally we were able to give this contribution for regional reconciliation, and we look forward in the years to come for working more with our neighbors and our European strategic partner. One of the aspects that will also be a further boost indeed will be, in addition of reaching a candidate status and starting negotiations at the end of this year, is to look forward to a historical settlement between Belgrade and Pristina, because this way there's going to be also a consensus within the European Union on this issue, and also more broadly looking into the world.
Božidar Đelić, Serbian Deputy Prime Minister in charge of European integration, thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for watching this edition of The Interview on France 24. Please stay with us. Goodbye.